I have one enduring memory of the 6 months I spent in the former USSR. I was making a documentary for the CBC on the 10th anniversary of the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was a hot morning around 11 o'clock in Moscow, and as we drove down the street I saw two drunks, so drunk they couldn't stand and they couldn't sit. They just sort of lurched and staggered and crashed into walls. Then their own vodka-propelled momentum hurled them against a telephone booth. They smashed the glass, smashed through the wood, and ended up lying comatose in a pool of blood on the pavement. We simply drove on. I had lost count of the number of bodies I'd seen lying on the streets in broad daylight. Other drunken Russians simply stepped over the corpses. Not just in Moscow, but all across the grim grey states of the former Soviet Union. Vodka was the only escape from the past, the present, and the future. I also remember filming in the barracks of Russian soldiers who had just come back from the meat grinder in Chechnya and the humiliation of Afghanistan. The soldiers were bitter, despairing men, often woefully underpaid. They lived with their families amid filth and squalor in apartments that stood in seas of mud. But that was then. Look what they're up to now. President Putin has given the go-ahead to reassemble the mighty war machine. The machine that kept NATO's fingers on its nuclear triggers during the 40 or so years of the Cold War. Now those lumbering long-range Russian bombers are again flying huge distances. Their aim? To enter disputed airspaces to make US, British and Canadian military commanders notice them. To let them know the Russians aren't coming, the Russians are back. And not just in the air. They intend to make the Syrian seaport one of their new naval bases. And just to needle the international community, they've placed their flag under the North Pole. The big question is, so what are they up to? Yeah, sure, Putin wants to become a superpower again. And remember, he's still got the bomb and he's got cosmonauts in space. One expert dismissed it as muscle rippling and wishful thinking fueled by one too many shots of vodka. Unless the Russians sense that the US has spent so much money and goodwill in Iraq, they will soon start waning as a superpower. And maybe the Russians want to dive right back in and just see how far they get. It's a long shot at best, but at least the Russians seem to think it's a shot worth taking.